Hello, lovely YouTube viewer. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Breaking the Blocks. As I always say, if you wouldn't mind giving me a little thumbs up, ding ding, if you like the content, I'm not forcing you, that would be absolutely wonderful. And I do read every single comment, so please drop it in the box below. And if you want to subscribe, I would love to have you as part of the gang. Let's have a look at what's happening this week on Breaking the Blocks.
I feel like the most successful people, at least from my observation, are able to sit in that and not make decisions based on fear or like grabbing on desperately to some old idea of who they were or what they think they need.
This week, I had the pleasure of interviewing Sarah Spencer. She is an amazing artist, but also a bit of a philosopher, I think, as well. She's one of those really cool girls that you probably always wanted to be when you were at school and never quite managed to be. But she hasn't got any kind of arrogance about it. She's just a really relaxed person who has learned a lot of lessons along the way and overcome some difficulties in her life, which of course is what this podcast is about, breaking the blocks. Now, this is quite a long episode, but there are no trigger warnings here because unlike other episodes where we've tackled some very difficult issues, there aren't any in this episode. But what we do have is a really wonderful, life-affirming conversation where we talk about the lessons we've learned, what's still to be learned, therapy, how it can help you, how you get over your fear of public speaking by standing on a stage and being a comedian. That's quite astounding. It's a really lovely interview. So if you want to pop it on in the background to whatever you're doing, I think you might find some interesting insights and hopefully help you to overcome some of your own blocks in your life. Well, today, lovely listener, I have got the coolest lady that I know. She is. She's one of those cool girls. You know, the ones that you always wanted to be. Well, I did. I always wanted to be the cool girl. It is Sarah Spencer. Hello, welcome to the studio, Sarah Spencer.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. Thanks for chatting with me.
Oh, no, you are more than welcome, my lovely. And your handle, your Instagram handle, because people always say to me, can you please tell us where we can find your guests? I put it in the description box, but if anybody is listening, it is I O the Alien.
I
Yes,
owe the alien. That's
at
me. Yes.
I-O, literally I and an O, the alien. So we're going to come to that in a second, Sarah, because I want to know what that's all about. Actually, I
You
do
got
know
it.
because you've told me, but I think our guests need to hear. But yeah, Sarah, it is lovely to have you here. And obviously you and I are crossing paths now because we're working together on the old Crafty
Yeah.
Monkeys front, which is great. So good to have, come across you through Carl Brown, who is a guest on
Yes.
this show.
Thank you, Carl, for that.
Yes, thank you, Carl. And he said to me, you have to work with this girl called Sarah. And I said, okay, why? And he said, she is so cool. Her work is fantastic. She is going to blow up. And next year, she's going to be everywhere. And good things do seem to be happening for you. But I certainly agree with all the things that he said. As I just said there, Sarah, yes, your work is really cool. You kind of do these amazing pop art portraits, I would call
Yes.
them. Really colorful and just so they remind me very much of the Andy Warhol stuff, that kind of way, but with your own unique spin. But you yourself, you just come across as this really cool, laid back character. Is that the real Sarah Spencer?
I mean, I would say I'm pretty laid back. Yes, it's true. Um, I, I don't know. I feel very grateful to be able to do what I do. I feel I draw inspiration from so many different things that I come across in my life. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just, like I said, I'm grateful to be able to do what I do. And so that gives me sort of I'm coming into each day with sort of joy and gratitude. I spent so much of my life, my younger years, working corporate office jobs, really not really not resonating with how I spent my time. And by the time I came home from work at the end of the day, I was so bagged from sort of what felt like selling my soul in the corporate world. So now that I've sort of my life has done a 180 in so many ways. I really do. It's have that gratitude that I mentioned. It's yeah, I'm just happy I get to do what I do.
Yeah, and I do think, Sarah, that you mentioned a really key word there, gratitude. And I really believe that
Mm,
if you live in gratitude and you're so grateful for what you have,
yeah.
not always wanting the next thing, that great things come to you. I really do believe that things kind of work out somehow. And I think that's what's happening to you. But I'm intrigued. So you say that you used to work in the corporate sector.
Yeah.
So, how did that change then? Because a lot of people do get stuck in the
Yeah.
corporate sector. Yes, there are people who love their jobs. I'm not dissing the corporate sector before anybody says,
Absolutely. Yeah.
people do, but there are some people who get stuck and they don't want to be there. And maybe they are creative or artistic, or they just want to do something else and they can't do it. So,
Yeah.
what made you make that leap? Was there a particular day, a moment? Did something push you? What happened?
Well, sort of it was for me it was life events that took place that made me, in my case, I moved to a new country. So I was, born and raised in Canada, spent most of my life in Vancouver, and I spent the last decade of sort of my corporate life, I was working for the British Columbia government as a property appraiser. And one summer, my best friend invited me to Burning Man, and she had an extra ticket and she said, "Come on, Sarah, let's go to this." And to be quite frank, I wasn't 100% into the idea, but I thought it would be a fun girls trip. So we went down, and I ended up meeting my now husband there, and he lived in Chicago, and so we dated. We did a long distance thing for a few years. And then finally, we kind of had to come to that place where it was like, okay, we're in our 30s. What's happening here? Like, is somebody going to move, or what's going on? And so I decided to move to Chicago. And sort of with that move was also a total life reset. And people would ask me, are you gonna keep doing appraisal here? And in my heart, it was like, I really don't want to. I want to take this opportunity to do something different, and one thing led to another, and I found myself in the arts.
So, what did you do then? So, what did you actually go and do?
More life events happened. So I moved to Chicago. We got married, and very shortly thereafter, I became pregnant with our son. And so there was this weird limbo time because I was going through American immigration where I was allowed to be in the country. I had to be in the country actually for a period. I wasn't allowed to leave. But I wasn't allowed to work, or at least not work a paid job. And so I started volunteering, and that's what brought me to a local radio station. And I had no radio experience whatsoever, but the station's director is this woman who, it just so happened, was very passionate about getting more women into broadcasting. And so
Yay.
I said to her, "Look, I've got so much time right now. I will do I will do anything you want. Please give me something to do." And so I ended up doing having a radio show, which I'm still doing, and spending a lot of time volunteering in the back end of the station. I also started taking art classes, and now I was always an artistic kid, but sort of all of a sudden having that time and energy for it, I fell in love with the arts, and I started teaching at a local art school here in Chicago. So it was sort of like it was a really, it felt like fate opening up for me, where one thing sort of led to another, and it's still unfolding. But that's really the ball that got things rolling for me.
Yeah. What's the name of the station, by the way? Just in case anybody is actually in Chicago and they want to listen.
Yes, it's Chirp Radio 107.1 FM Chicago, or chirpradio.org. We broadcast online as well. I've got listeners from Europe and Asia and all over the place.
Yeah. Well, you have got a fabulous radio voice, I have to tell you. I mean, just the
Thank
way you said
you.
that. Coming from
Thank you.
Chicago. No, you have got. One thing that is striking me so far, Sarah, is, as you said, you got the ball rolling and things kind of fell into place, and they're still falling into place for you, which, as we said, you practice gratitude. Have you always been this way, though, in your life? Were you always just a happy-go-lucky kid? Were you always kind of feeling like things were working out for you, or has that kind of changed and evolved for you as well?
I will say, at my core, even when the world feels out of control and really crazy, especially at this time in
Yeah.
history for me, I do have this core optimism, and I've had that my whole life. I don't know really where it comes from, even though I always had this greater sense and this greater trust that things would work out in some way. I certainly went through periods of my life where I felt I didn't know what I was here for, so to speak. And I remember for the longest time, especially when I was working in that corporate world, I it would be something that I thought about every day where it's like, my job is okay. I didn't hate it. I loved my colleagues. I always loved interacting with people. But something deep down was like, this is not it. This is not it for you. Yeah, you're good at your job, but you can do more. But I didn't know what that was. And so it was a struggle for a long time because I felt like like can't somebody just beam some answer into my head? It felt like I was really in a stuck place. All that being said, when I was quiet and was able to sort of get in touch with the inner voice, I just had this sense that yeah, things there was a greater purpose to my life and to trust in that. So I think even now, I always sort of think to myself, you don't have to see the whole staircase, just the next step. And I'm sure I'm stealing that from somebody else, but that metaphor really resonated with me, where it's like, okay, just whatever I'm working on right now is giving me the tools to take the next step.
But I think one really important word that you use there, and then I was thinking something in my head, and then you kind of agreed with what I was thinking because of what you said, is that you would sit there, you'd want the answers to be beamed to you, but already that means that you were kind of asking for that higher power. You were
Yeah.
wanting to listen to your intuition. You were listening to your intuition because you were going, come on, I'm searching for answers here. You weren't kind of railing against things. As you said, you like your job in some respects. You just felt like there was a bigger purpose, but that was something within you that was kind of wakening up and you were listening. And that is so important. And that's something that a lot of us don't do. That's a skill that I've only just learned, is patience. I remember when I started Crafty Monkeys and my husband said, are you going to stick at this time? And I was really offended. And I
Yeah.
said to him, what do you mean? And he said, because you're like a rocket. He said, you light up the sky like a firework. And I was like, oh, thank you. And then he went, and then you fizzle out and you give up.
Uh,
You
yeah.
give up. He said, it's not that you don't have the capacity to carry on, but you give up. And he said, you give up on things. And you know what? That was my biggest lesson. I didn't like hearing it, but he was right. He was right.
Yeah.
And the thing with the business is 5 years now, there's no sign of it disappearing. There are hard times. There are moments when I feel like shutting it down and going and buying a tiny beach or in Barbados somewhere on a beach that no one lives on and just kind of
Yeah.
like, there are times, but I've learned that patience. I've learned that if you're in a sticky moment, just sit in it, but
Yeah.
be open and to listen to your intuition. And that's something that you've certainly been doing, I think.
Yeah, it's funny what you just mentioned, sort of having this idea of having lots of different interests and you sort of pursue one wholeheartedly and then one day it's not really doing it for you anymore, so you shift into something else, and that totally describes who I was and still am to a certain extent. I remember as a kid, I did, my parents would put me in various activities, whether it was dancing or different art classes or I remember taking, woodworking and basketball and this and that. And lots, I played so many different musical instruments. And I would keep changing the instrument that I wanted to play. And I remember, and it stuck with me. And I finally, in my, adulthood, have released this. But my mom would say to me, Sarah, if you just stuck with one of those things, imagine where you would be. And it affected me in a really negative way, actually, because I had that self talk that changing my interests was wrong. What I was doing was somehow wrong. And then I remember in my 30s, I had a therapist where we were having this conversation. And he goes, so what? You're interested in something new, then explore it. Like, just get rid of that, lose the shame around it, but keep that curiosity. And now I'm in my early 40s, and that curiosity that I have has really fed into my art. I think all of those all of those skills that I picked up from sort of going down various rabbit holes, they fed something in me. And I actually trust and count on the fact that I will find more things to be curious about. I've come to a place now where I can say, oh, I can't wait to see who I am when I'm 60, because it's going to be surprising to me. And that's a great thing. I coming from a place where, not knowing what my purpose was in life, and sort of feeling shame for not sticking with anything, to now going, I trust that I'm going to be doing something really cool and I can't wait to see what that is. It's been a profound shift. And I hope I get to live to a really ridiculously old age in a healthy body, because I think it's gonna be cool. Like, whatever. There's a David Bowie quote, and I love David Bowie. He's like my guiding light, where he said, and I'm probably gonna butcher it, but I don't know where I'm going from here, but I know it's gonna be interesting. Or I know it's not gonna be boring, or something along those lines. And it's like, yeah, that's it. I think it's a great core belief to have.
Yeah, because it's that curiosity. That's such a great word that you said there. And that really is, I think, the key to life is that curiosity, always wanting to learn more. I think if we get to a point where we think, well, I've learned it all, there's nothing else for me to learn now, there's nothing else for me to do, I've learned my lessons, I think then we've lost the plot. I think we've closed down ourselves, and then that's when no new opportunities will come to you, because, and I think it's kind of an arrogance that if we sit there and say
Yeah.
that, it's so arrogant of us to think that we have just learned everything. There are so many lessons to learn in this life.
Yes.
And I think as well, Sarah, that they often say, and I really believe this, that quite often things will go very wrong before they go right.
Yeah.
Doors have to close before new ones open. But I
Yeah.
think the difficulty in both of those things happening, either a door closing and a new one opening, or things going very wrong before they go right, is that there's a gap in the middle. And that's where you have to have the faith and the trust and be thankful for what you have, be thankful for what you had and what you
Yeah.
learned from it, so that you can then move on and be ready for the next thing to come along. And
Yes.
I think that's the scary place. And that's where maybe people start grasping for things before they're ready, because it's like, well, that door's closed. I need another door. I need another door. Instead of sitting
Yeah.
there in the dark going, okay, let's decompress. What did we learn? What are we going to
Yes.
take forwards? And something will come in. I'm a firm believer in that.
Absolutely. And there's so many things that popped up in my head when you mentioned that. For one, this concept of failure. I know as a child, I did pretty well in school. I was pretty gifted academically. And, my parents really were proud of me. They pushed for like the A grades. And I felt, or I internalized, this desire that I needed to be perfect, or this desire to yeah, not fail, certainly not publicly. And I actually, that held me back for the longest time. I think now that, failure is like no one enjoys it, but I think failure is something to celebrate because you learn, or I have learned so much every time that I did something and it didn't work out, in big ways and in small ways. So now that my son is 5 at this point, like if he fails at something, we kind of celebrate it. I remember reading something, I don't know if it was an artist or writer or who it was, but there was this idea she had a goal that in a year she had to fail 100 times. And every time she failed, she would like write it down. I was like, okay, check, that one's done, check. Or getting the rejection letters, for example. It was a good thing for her because it meant she was pushing. So there's that aspect. And then another thing that popped up in my head when you were talking was this idea of that sort of liminal space where a door is shut and you're waiting for that other one to open. And that's a profound discomfort. When I first moved to Chicago from Vancouver, I had a wonderful, tight community of friends in Vancouver. I was dancing, I was doing comedy. I had these groups, these circles that I moved in. I was like that person. I felt like, and it's a fairly small city compared to Chicago, but I felt like I could walk down the street and run into someone that I knew. So I felt very connected and grounded there. And also through my work and all of those things. And then I moved to Chicago and it felt like all of that was taken away. And it felt like I didn't know how to define myself without those external pieces. And it was tremendously uncomfortable. It took me a few years actually to really find my footing. And then becoming a mother, and there's this whole other new things being added on. But I'm like, who is Sarah? Who am I at my core? And so I think, it's not easy, but sitting in that tough time where you don't have answers and maybe you don't know who you are. I feel like the most successful people, at least from my observation, are able to sit in that and not make decisions based on fear or like grabbing on desperately to some old idea of who they were or what they think they need. There are profound lessons to be learned in that really uncomfortable space.
Yeah, beautifully said. I absolutely agree with you. And I think what happens is when you are in that really uncomfortable space, you want to escape it. So then you seek the validations, the distractions to
Yeah.
get you out of that. And
Yeah.
that only prolongs your agony because
Yeah.
while ever you are seeking things, while ever you're searching out pleasure, distractions, you're addicted to something, you're constantly looking. It's like a battery that's wearing out because you're never
Yeah.
replenishing it. You're just constantly, and while ever you're looking for all those things, eventually you're going to run out.
Yeah.
You're going to run out of people. You're going to
Yeah.
run out of objects to buy, of people to get the validation from, of you are going to run out of money, run out of friendships because you're not giving anything back,
Yeah.
because you're pretty empty, because you
Yeah.
haven't found yourself. In
Yeah.
order to give, you have to find yourself, don't you? You have to, as you say, you have to find out who you are and
Yeah.
sit in that darkness. I've been there, and it is
Yeah.
tough and it is frightening. And as you say, something you said there about fear. Fear is what drives you to seek, because it's so uncomfortable.
Yes.
You have to overcome that fear
Yes.
and just stop,
Yeah.
just sit.
And not the numbing yourself out. I know, I mean, and that drives so many addictive behaviors, whether it's substance abuse, but also I remember there was a period in my life where, and this was back in Vancouver, where I got addicted, and it sounds really weird, but I was addicted to meditation.
Yeah.
But for me, it was a form of escapism. it was like, oh, I can connect to some cosmos. And I would hear these stories of these people that have their guides that they talk to, and I'm like, well, why am I not hearing voices? If I just meditate harder, then maybe these magical beings will show up for me. And really, yeah, it was a form of escapism. So like, yeah, whether, like I said, it could, whether it's substance abuse and like seeking that sort of uh, sensory stimulation, or
Yeah.
numbness, and ultimately it's numbness that comes out of that, or yeah, going down these things that are healthy but too much, too rigid, where there's no room left for that discomfort. It's still trying to numb away that dis-ease. So I mean, it's easier said than done, getting through those periods, but yeah, it's definitely an important part of the human experience.
But I think one of the keys is to realizing when you're going down that path.
Yeah,
And it's really interesting you say there about the meditation. And there's actually a lot of toxic spirituality
yeah,
around. I think we've become so much more aware now on this planet about uh, awakenings, spiritual awakenings, finding ourselves, listening to our souls. And there is so much out there now that there never used to be. But as you say, sometimes you can fall down that rabbit hole of searching for that, that spiritual awakening, that voice that tells you what to do. Then you're searching for that. And then, as you say, with the meditation, so you sit there and you light the candles and you put your stones out or whatever, and you get your spot. But what you're doing while you're doing that is you're distracting yourself from your pain again. It's almost like you're
yes.
tidying your bedroom. You're tidying your meditation spot. And then you think, right, okay, sit here for now, 15 minutes. I'm doing something again. It's doing something. You
Yeah,
just have to stop. And for me, I think personally, it's better to sometimes just go for a walk. Just go for a
yeah,
walk. Don't put on your iPhone. Don't put on your music. Just go for a walk and
yeah,
look at what's around you. Look at the birds, look at the river, look at the grass, look at the pavements, look at the cars, look at the people, whatever it
yeah,
is, just go and do something like that. If you find yourself thinking, I must meditate every day, I think if you tell yourself you've got to do something every day, that's a problem because that becomes an addiction in itself. Then you feel
yeah,
guilty if you don't do it. Oh, I've missed my meditation this morning. Ah,
absolutely. And actually, it's funny, like on this topic, there was, I guess, probably 6 years where I was vegan, and I'm not, no shame on vegans. I still have a lot of plant focused meals in my week, but for me at least, it was this rigidity. It was like, I'm gonna put my spirulina powder in my smoothie, and my diet was gonna be on point, and no animal products, and doing the an hour of meditation in a day. And I mean, who's got time for that anymore? But really, it was not sustainable. And so the real key now for me, and I'm still, finding my way through it, is like, what is sustainable for me? What does that look like? What is really healthy? Where I'm not being rigid with myself. I'm being flexible. And there's no, shame if I didn't do something the right way, or anything like that. So I mean, it's still a journey, and it shifts throughout life. Yeah, you can go too far. You can go too far in either direction. And so balance is really what I'm striving for.
yeah.
I'm still working on it.
And that's not to sit here and both of us to say we are the absolute gurus. I've had days where I have been feeling uncomfortable. It's the energies around me or it's whatever. And so I pick up my phone and I think, well, I'll just check Instagram because it's my business, right? I think, oh, I'm going down a rabbit hole. Okay, I'll check my emails now. I'll check my emails, and then I then go, oh, what else? Oh, YouTube. Let me just have a look at YouTube. Oh, because and and then I feel myself just falling, and then I realize I'm distracting myself. I'm doing it. I'm looking for something. I'm looking for something on my phone to distract me from the feelings that I was having 20 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Let's go back to those feelings. Let's put the phone down. But that's the awareness. So it's very easy to fall into those behaviors. But if you can be aware, if something inside of you says, hello, hello, hang on, look at what you're doing, look what you're doing, then
Yes.
that's part of the battle, isn't it?
Yes. Absolutely.
Well, Sarah, I'm going to have to go back to something that you said as well earlier on. And I'm sure you must know now what I'm going to try and pull out of you, because this is breaking the blocks, right? And you mentioned the T word. You said, when I was talking to my therapist.
Ah, yes.
So we need to know, because right now everybody's going, this woman is a paragon of virtue. She's
No.
got it sorted. So if you don't mind me asking, what was it that sent you to your therapist, if that's not too personal a question?
No. So I've worked with therapists at a few different points in my life. I went through high school as a youth. When I graduated, I very soon after moved out of my parents' home. I went into university. I worked a full-time job and went to school full-time, so it was like a lot of responsibility. And then I went right into the working world, and so I there was that pressure, like I had to survive, I had to pay my bills. And so I would, do my jobs and do think I was doing okay, but I had no hobbies at that point in my life. I knew I liked music. I knew, a couple things, but I remember, especially being in the dating world, the question I hated the most, so silly and so basic, when people would say, "What do you do for fun?" Because I felt like I didn't have an interesting answer. I'd be like, "Yeah, I watch TV, I go to the movies, read books," but I didn't know who I was. And so over the years, I became depressed. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know who I was ultimately, although I didn't know that at the time. And so I started seeing a therapist when I was in Vancouver, and over time it was helpful. I mean, I encourage everybody to get a therapist that can. It's so helpful. Over time, I started, I think taking an improv class might be fun, and sort of going down that. And I started learning about who I was. And then when I moved to Chicago and became a mother, I ended up with postpartum anxiety. And I just, yeah, I remember I was at this period in my life where I literally cried every day. And I remember there's some awareness now about postpartum depression. And I remember thinking, well, I couldn't possibly be that, because I didn't feel sad, even though I was crying. It felt to me more like overwhelmed by love, and like just big emotions. There was knowing that I was crying every day, and that everything felt so big, and I didn't feel like I could contain it. I remember going to see my midwife, and after talking with her, she spent 45 minutes with me, bless her. She was like, it sounds like you might have some anxiety, Sarah. And my husband, bless him, he's a big believer in therapy too. He sees a therapist every week, and that was always something I loved about him. It's anybody who has that willingness to work on themselves. I think that's just like, for me, looking for a partner, looking for friends. It's those people, that are willing to work on themselves and see themselves for where they are right now. It's a great quality in a human. So he supported me going to see a therapist. And so I've been seeing her now for 4 years, more than 4 years. And it's just, it's been so helpful to have that person where I can just talk about the things I'm feeling guilty about, and the ways I feel I'm deficient, and celebrate the joys too. Like, things are really great right now. And to have somebody that is able to have that safe space for me, have that sort of container, and can also remind me of, oh, this reminds me of when you went through da da da. And so you start noticing those patterns. it has been and continues to be really helpful for me.
I'm a huge believer in therapy. And when I met my husband, uh, 28 years ago, we both used to push each other's buttons badly. You know, I used to call it throwing the lemon. He'd stand there and throw a lemon during a discussion, and I'd be like, why are you throwing the lemon? It was so antagonistic. And obviously, it was all coming, from emotions within him. He wasn't a bad person. It was like he was just getting frustrated that we weren't able to communicate somehow. But we were both wounded people and both pushing each other's
Mhm.
buttons. And we would have these huge explosions. And he said, I remembers, I'd just go, I'm leaving, I'm never going back. And he would watch me walk off down the street in this little tartan skirt that I had, swooshing in the wind, knowing I'd be back in 25 minutes. And I always did come back. But, we had these great big rows, but we actually went to see individually, separately, the same therapist.
Oh no.
I don't know if
That's
that's
so
even allowed,
funny.
but she did see both of us. I stayed the longest. I was there 5 years. He did a year. But I think it kind of, I don't know how she did it, because if I would talk about Jake, she wouldn't really, she wouldn't kind of go, yeah, because I know he does that whenever. But
Yeah.
somehow she was able to kind of open, it was like marriage guidance counseling, but without the two of us together. So we were looking at ourselves and our own patterns, but she knew where the button pressing was coming from because she was working on both of us. It was quite extraordinary.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then I did a lot of work on myself, and I would love to have a therapist again. I think therapy is a fantastic thing, but it is expensive. But I will
Yeah.
say, if you want therapy, I mean, when I had my therapist, I was cleaning toilets to get my therapy money because I was an out
Yeah.
of work actor and I did loads of jobs, and I would clean. Well, it wasn't, I say cleaning, it was the cleaning a house. So I was cleaning a house for someone, but I would clean their house knowing that I had just paid for my therapy, and I would sit in that therapy and value it even more because I'd worked
Yeah.
quite hard to get that therapy lesson. So yeah, I think, or session, I think therapy is a fantastic thing. You mentioned there, though, Sarah, that you would talk to your therapist about maybe things that you were guilty about or
Mhm.
things like that, which obviously, yeah, is maybe an underlying factor in the anxiety, but it's more the big emotions. What
Mhm.
things did you feel guilty about then when you were talking to your therapist? And this is postpartum, this is after having your little boy.
Well, I think, and it's still something I'm working on. A big thing that I feel guilt about is my privilege. So going back to my life in Vancouver, like yes, I was working a government job. I was supporting a partner at the time who was doing a graduate degree, and we were broke, broke. Vancouver's a very expensive place to live, and my small government paycheck just wasn't making ends meet. And I remember going through this period of a few years where we struggled to just put food on our table. I was too I don't know if it was pride or if it was shame. Two sides of the same coin. I would have definitely qualified for the food bank, but I was like, "Oh no, that's for people that really need it." I have a job, so I didn't feel like I really needed it. But I do remember looking on the street for coins to see if I could scrounge up enough to buy like a can of beans so I could round out a meal. Like it was bad. And I remember just like praying and like trusting in the goodness of the universe and saying like if I ever get out of this situation, I promise I'm going to do like pay it back in the world somehow. And then I moved to Chicago and I had, like I said, it was a 180-degree change. My husband works in finance and we're very secure financially, which sort of, yeah, there was that time that I wasn't allowed to work due to immigration, but knowing that we were still secure and like I didn't have that financial pressure anymore, and I could do art classes and I had money for that. I could spend my time in this way without, I don't know, like the stress. I felt guilty about that because it was like, well, everyone should be able to have this. Why me? Like, this is not fair for everyone else. Why do I get it? And so yeah, it that guilt held me back from actually enjoying my privilege and using my privilege. I mean, that's the nature of privilege. Is it's not earned, it's circumstantial. I'm a white woman, I'm healthy, I English is my first language. I'm financially secure. And because I have those things, I have to use it. I have to use it for the betterment of myself, like getting able to afford therapy so that I can give that back to the community. And yes, everyone should be able to have all those privileges, but that's just not the way it is right now. So I feeling guilty does nothing. Like, use the privilege for good. And yeah, so that's sort of, I'm still, like I said, I'm still working on this.
You know, you know what the irony is as well is that because you feel guilty about the privilege and therefore you want to give back and you'll do lots of things that are, giving back somehow, actually more will come to you.
Right.
That's the irony. The more you
Right.
care about people and the more you give out to those people, the more you will get back.
Yeah.
It's I absolutely believe in the laws of the universe, Sarah. I really do. So bad news for you. Your guilt's going to get even worse because you're just going to get more privileged. But no, I
Yeah.
do understand what you're saying. I had an interesting conversation with Zach Foster, actually, and he was talking in his episode a lot about privilege, but he was talking about it from definitely being a white middle class American man, and that his family, half of his family, had been in the white slavers. They had black servants, and he only just discovered this, and he was talking about the guilt that this was part of his family, and we weren't that far down the road. It
Yeah.
wasn't like 500 years ago. So yeah, it does sound like a strange thing. I mean, I said to you before we came on the show today, Sarah, that I'd had an interview yesterday with someone who had had a very, 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 very tough life and
Hmm.
was very underprivileged in many ways. And I did actually feel the same as you. I went and sat and looked out of my window and thought, I feel quite bad in a way because I've talked about my childhood, that I was damaged by my childhood. But all that was really that was my dad was a bit emotionally unavailable.
Right.
And I started thinking, wow, there are people out there who've really got it
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
But here's an interesting thing my therapist taught me at that time, which was I used to say things like that to her. I used to say, well, I haven't had it that bad in my childhood. I mean, there's a lot worse that we know goes on,
Yeah.
violence and sexual abuse, etc. I said, I haven't had it that bad. And she said, everybody's pain is relevant. And what's the word she used? Not relevant. Everybody's pain is relative to themselves.
Hmm.
If you are feeling pain, it is real and it's your pain, and you need to be able to work through it. You
Hmm.
cannot compare yourself to somebody else. You can't say, well, they've had it so much worse, so I need to just dull my pain right down and I need to be grateful and thankful for everything. You still are entitled to work on your pain and what has affected you. That was one of the
Yeah.
most important things that my therapist taught me. I don't think that's so true.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's a very difficult line, isn't it? It's a very difficult line, that feeling of privilege, but still feeling like you have your own pain or you have your own anxiety or your own guilt. And you've still got to deal with that, even though you're thinking, well, I really shouldn't be sitting here talking about it because for goodness sakes, I'm so privileged. But
Yeah.
it's a kind of vicious cycle, really. But you are entitled to have those feelings and you are entitled to talk about those feelings.
Yes. And so this something like this came up actually just last week for me. I was in a my son, they had a parent night in his classroom, and so I was there with some of the other parents, and his teacher, and we were talking about this idea of goodness in the world for children under the age of 7, especially, and how we need to sort of make a bubble around them and maybe not like watch the news in front of them or have those conversations, which I've been guilty of, talking to my mom in front of them and complaining about the state of the world, because these children need to trust that the world is good, and then as they sort of develop, they're able to look more critically, take action. And I remember when this conversation was happening, that sort of privilege guilt sort of showed up for me. And I was thinking, yes, I don't disagree that children need to feel safe and that the world is good. But it was really sticky for me, because I was like, that's such a privilege, because there are so many children. I mean, there's children in Gaza right now that are dealing with, losing their families and some very real stuff. And why is it that, these American children right now get, this little bubble created around them. But ultimately, for those children anywhere in the world that have that privilege, it's so important to create that for them, because when they grow up, they will have that innate sense of goodness and they will be able to fight the good fight. So it was just, I think I have a real justice complex. I want things to be fair, and they're not right now. And so, but realizing that, to use the privilege again is not a bad thing.
Yeah. So how do you intend to try and give back then? Because you said, I want to try and give back to society, or do what I can to alleviate that burden of feeling that guilt, or of believing that it's not fair and there should be justice. So what do you want to do to try and give back?
Um, I remember when I first started my business, it was really before I was doing art, where my intention was to give back, 10% of everything I earned creating my art would go into some sort of charity. And I think that is, and I still think that's good. And we do give a lot financially to different organizations that we support. And part of it for me is also working for free in some cases, which I like when I work in the radio station. I still do, like, that's an unpaid job for me, and something I do joyfully. And I think that's key for me, is this this idea of giving back. It doesn't have to be punitive. This isn't like the Middle Ages where they, take whatever the 10%, or it needs to come from a place of joy. But for me, what it looks like, yeah, right now is spending my time, and to a certain extent my dollars, to help organizations that are doing the good work, or making the world a better place. Even right now, in here in Chicago, it's a very liberal city. We're sort of in a bubble here in the US in so many ways. That's getting involved with the parents in the other parents in my kids' school, and forming community action groups and sharing resources, calling my senators, calling my representative in the House, writing letters. I'm privileged to have the time to be able to do those things. Protesting. A few weeks ago, I organized a protest sign making party where I supplied all the art stuff, the paper and the posts and whatnot, so that we could all make signs to go protest. It's yeah, those are the types of things I can do right now, and I'm sure that will evolve as my life changes as well. But it's that sense of doing what I can for my community, I think, is what it comes down to. we are in a position right now where we can do the financial support. But even if that were taken away, even if I were, if I were poor again, I can still show up for my community. I can still, do the craft nights, do the, whatever. All of that helps to foster a strong community that looks out for each other. And I think, in this hyper connected world, it's great that I can, speak with you across an ocean. But on the day to day level, it's leaving my house and connecting with my neighbors, just being a good Samaritan. It sounds so like, I don't know, 1950s idealism, but I think we've lost a lot of that. Like being the friendly person to talk to or shoulder to cry on, like that's giving back to. So it can be big and small. So it's sort of, yeah, and it's evolving. I don't know if that answered your
No,
question.
it absolutely does. No, it really does. And I think it's so important to give back to, as we call it, the collective of
Yeah,
people that we surround ourselves with, as you say, your neighbors, but also people across the world like you. And, it's like me with this podcast. I don't earn a single penny from this podcast. And it
yeah,
costs me quite a bit because I have to pay for a podcast host, and I have to pay for
yeah,
the app that I'm using today, Riverside, to do it. But I love it. It brings me great joy. And what brings me really great joy is when I get the comments or the emails from people, and I get a lot saying, I listened to your episode today. I am now going to try what you said, or I've realized I'm not the only one, or you've brightened my day. Not me, but the person that I've been interviewing. And these are fantastic things. And I think by giving back, and as you've said there, just being part of that community and doing what you can, as you say, if it's making signs with people, doing what you can, it makes you feel so good.
yeah,
But as I've said, Sarah, I think things come back in unexpected ways.
yes,
Things will come back to you, and I'm not saying that you do things for monetary gain. I'm saying that you put out there what you want and you give, and
yeah.
it all comes around and goes around.
A few months back, I came across a situation where here in the US, a couple quilters were being censored from a big American, guild for quilters. And they were censored. One was, one artist had a piece of work that was discussing reproductive freedoms, and the organizers of the show were like, "No, we're not having that here." And then another one made a beautiful abstract piece that they thought looked a little too much like a vagina. So they're like, we're not gonna show this. And so it just like that was one of those injustices to me that it just sat with me, and it really irritated me. I couldn't let it go. And I reached out to the artist and I said, "Hey, do you mind if I write a blog post about this? Um, and can I like show your work? I'm just gonna write this thing." And honestly, I was expecting maybe 100 people to read it. I ended up with 20,000 people on my website in 1 week from around the world. And I will say, like, I'm pretty sure I'm blacklisted from certain organizations in the US. And this is a part of using my privilege too. Like, it's not, I would rather have my name blacklisted by organizations like that and not be able to show my work with them, but use my voice for justice, and perhaps organizations that are more aligned with me will be attracted to that. So, like for me, it was worth, it was certainly worth getting a little bit of extra attention. And I'm not, I'm not, even though I was just talking about making protest signs, I'm not, what am I trying to say? Somebody that's overly aggressive. But I do, as I said before, have that sense of justice in me. Yeah, it was very worth it for me to potentially lose exhibition opportunities to align myself with something, with a greater cause. I know if I were in a position where I was really struggling to make ends meet, that also limits your voice in so many ways because you need those opportunities. You need everything you can get. But because I guess I'm not holding on for dear life, so to speak, I can use my voice to criticize power, um, or criticize those organizations that in my view are unethical. And so that's another way of using privilege for me that came up recently.
Yeah. But I think you also find your people, Sarah. There is no point. I've said this in so many podcasts. I apologize, dear listener, if you've listened to these podcasts and you know what I'm going to say right now. What's my favorite phrase? People are going, Janet Claire, when she said that authenticity is magnetic. That's right. Because that's one of my
Uh,
favorite sayings. Authenticity is magnetic. You, if you're being your authentic self, the right people will be drawn to you and the
yeah,
wrong people will go. I remember when I first started breaking the blocks and I started the Instagram account and I had like 22 followers. And then I decided to put up a post that was just me talking about something. And the first couple of posts had been about the podcast. So I'd gained some followers who were like, they obviously found me somehow and they were like, oh, this is a podcast. And I think I lost like 5 followers. And it was very obvious because I'd only had 22. And I remember saying that my daughter was still in the room next door. She's gone to uni now, but I shouted to her, hey! And she was like, what's going on? I went, I've lost 5 followers. She thought this was hilarious. But I said, I'm really upset. I'm really upset because that's me. They've rejected me. And she went, good. They can
yeah,
now trot on. And you'll find
yeah,
5 new ones who will like what you've just said. Should you? Because I said, should I take the post down? Should I take the post down? She said, no, you have to be you. If you're creating this account, you have to be you because
yeah.
that's who the authentic person is. You can't pretend to be something. And I was like, you are absolutely right. You are absolutely right. And that's what I just follow now. I just put up whatever I want to put up. And yeah, I lose followers. I put up something about me rambling on and people go, oh, I'm not interested. But
Right.
you have to be you. So you losing those opportunities at those galleries, at those exhibition places, you'll find new opportunities
Yeah.
from other people who really appreciated what you did, and they will
Yes.
fill the gap. And that is so important. You have to use your voice
Yes.
for others and for yourself. And by the way, on that note, I would like to say I saw those 2 pieces that you're talking about. And I didn't see anything myself in them that was offensive. And if you, first of all, 2 things. If you go to the National Portrait Gallery in London, or the National Gallery in London, you'll see lots of vaginas on display. They're mostly from paintings from the 18th century, but there are lots of naked ladies there in full frontal for you to have a look at. And the second thing is that if I open my explore page on my Instagram, and this seems to be becoming very prolific now, more than it used to be, there are lots of things popping up that seem to be ladies in compromising positions, in very little clothing, that are far more offensive than that quilt,
Yes.
which I couldn't see myself what the problem was.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's a lot more in the world to be worrying about than
Absolutely. Yeah.
some fabric. Uh, that was a statement piece. So yeah, I applaud you on that, and that's fantastic. And you were seen by 20,000 people, and that's
Yeah.
great. That's great.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Have you? It's interesting though, because one of the things that you said you struggled from as well was the postpartum anxiety.
Yeah.
And obviously, when you make a decision to use your voice, as you've just done there, and there is a potential that those opportunities are going to be closed down to you because of what you've just written, we know why, of all the reasons we've just said, but that in itself can be anxiety inducing, and particularly to someone who has suffered from serious anxiety.
So much of it is just acknowledging that it's there. And also I journal. I journal every day. I do the morning pages where I wake up and I just brain dump everything. And there is some magic in that. just being able to, see the patterns and once identify and then shift sort of patterns of thought and patterns of behavior, or be able to separate them from you as a spiritual being. So those things have all been really helpful for me. Also, I channel a lot of emotion into my art. So for me, making art is therapeutic. When I work on a portrait, I almost feel like while I'm working on it, I absorb a little bit of the emotion of the person that I'm portraying. And just recently, I did a portrait of an American abolitionist by the name of John Brown, who he was the first man executed for treason in the U.S. But his big sin was he was an abolitionist. He was anti-slavery. He was sick of basically polite society talking about how slavery was bad and not doing anything. And so he organized rebellions and freed slaves. And so when I was working on his piece, and of course this was also I was finishing it while Trump was getting inaugurated, so there was just a lot happening emotionally in the world. But I felt a lot of that anger coming up while creating that piece of art. I was so ready to be done with it. I mean, I love it. It's a great piece, but it was like, oh, that's intense. So being able to channel things like anger, anxiety, etc. through my work, I often don't know when I choose somebody to portray. I it's hard to tell me like what came first, the chicken or the egg. Like, do I choose somebody and then I absorb their emotions? Or is it that I'm already feeling these things and I feel the need to channel it into a piece, which is probably the latter. But certainly art has been therapeutic for me. Um, art, yeah, journaling, therapy sessions, um, and also just being able to sit in my anxiety when it does come up. When I had those 20,000 viewers on my website, it was the weirdest. Like, that was the first time I had that kind of attention on me. And there were a few nights there when that was all going on where it's like I couldn't sleep well. And I remember telling my therapist, I was like, this sounds really weird, but I can like feel people on my website right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, just being able to find the moments of calm where I could and working through it and yeah, I don't know what the perfect answer is, but
No, that's great. That's how you work through it. And some really, I think, top tips there in terms of the journaling. It is a really, and people probably think, well, what do I write? But all you do is take your pen to your paper and you just write what comes out of your stream of consciousness, really. And it's just
absolutely,
writing those things out. I mean, I do think if you're angry with someone or hurt or something, it's great to write those things out and then
yeah,
throw it in the bin. Don't send it,
yeah,
don't send that text, write it instead, because it's almost like you're just getting out of your system. And that's that
yes,
thing about forgiveness and then moving on, isn't it? So I think journaling is a fantastic thing to do, and I think the art. I want to ask you about something else though that I know that you did, and I wondered if this was a form of therapy, because believe me, I think this takes I'm just going to say it, balls of steel to be able to do this stand up comedy.
yeah,
And you did this. So,
yeah.
wow. Okay. Where, how, when, what about?
So this was in my pre-Chicago times, and this was sort of something that came out of that first round of therapy that I went through. I didn't know who Sarah was. I was a little worker bee that went to work, came home, made dinner, and got tired and went to bed. Um, and through therapy, I remembered that one of my obsessions is comedy from the youngest age. Like, I remember watching this CBC in Canada, and they'd have the clips of comedians. I remember, yeah, 5, 6 years old, I would watch the stand-ups, and I probably shouldn't have. It was not appropriate. But I've always loved comedy. And so
And who were your heroes? Who were you watching at that time?
it was anybody. I mean, Bill Hicks, Eddie Murphy, Janine Garofalo. I mean, now Ali Wong. I mean, there's so many. Oh my gosh, Hannah Gadsby, I really love. David Cross. Kids in the Hall, a Canadian sketch comedy show. Um, I remember my best friend. She listens to a lot of podcasts, and she's like, "Oh, they just started this improv comedy school in Vancouver, Sarah. You should join." And I said, "Oh, like that sounds that could be fun," but it also really scared me. I should also mention in this conversation that I was absolutely terrified of public speaking. In fact, I changed my major in college when I found out that one of my required courses required me to do an hour-long presentation. I was like, it's not worth it. I'll change my major so I don't have to take that class. But yet somehow, I think because it was comedy and something that I always really enjoyed, I was willing to take that chance. And so I ended up taking these improv classes and meeting a whole bunch of really awkward people. It's funny, you would think that people that are drawn to comedy are very confident, but it was actually like we were a bunch of nervous balls of energy. I sort of had built up that a little bit of confidence, a little bit. I was a little more comfortable with public speaking and basically being an idiot in front of people. I felt okay doing that, and failing publicly. I was okay with that. And I saw a community college of all places in Vancouver. They were offering a stand up comedy clinic. So I signed up for that. Yeah, this group of us every Wednesday night we would come together for 3 hours and workshop, the bad jokes we wrote that week. And then after that, I just sort of kept going. I would go to the pizza parlor who had a 10 p.m. show on Tuesday of stand-ups, and I'd meet the local comedians. And I especially it was as being a woman in that world. Really, that's the thing I credit with getting me more comfortable with public speaking. I definitely had jokes that failed in front of a room full of people, and it doesn't feel good, of course. But to know that even though it doesn't feel good, I'm okay. And I think knowing that I was doing something in spite of being scared, it's like, oh, I am brave. That really developed a lot of confidence for me. And I will say that having that background tied directly into me getting a gig as a radio host because, all of a sudden I was used to practicing in front of people. Those are two of the very few things I can think of that you have to practice in front of people. You can't do it in a room by yourself. It was one of those little rabbit holes I went down, going back to the beginning of our conversation. It's like I picked up that hobby, but it developed a certain muscle in me. But it wasn't the life that I wanted, but the skills that I wanted. And it was something about, for me, facing that fear. It felt like it was a big sort of life goal check mark for me. Um, yeah, so it's something that changed my life.
I think it's amazing. And the fact that you said that you were terrified of public speaking. I mean, for
Yeah.
me to go into stand up comedy would be absolutely terrifying. And I'm not frightened of being on a stage and, doing
Right.
all of stuff. But I honestly, and, some people have said, oh, you're really funny. You should try. And I'm like, no, no, no. Just, when I'm having a conversation with someone, my little facial, I work off people. So when I'm having a conversation with someone, I can be quite quick with my timing. I get witty things in my head and I say them, or I pull faces or whatever. But to stand on a stage and just
Mhm.
be the funny one for an hour, I think it's one of the biggest things that I respect in performers when they can do that. But yeah,
Right.
so I really admire you for, being so, I just find that astounding. Oh yeah, I changed my major because I was so terrified of doing an hour-long presentation. But
Yes.
then I went into stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
That is amazing. When you did your comedy then, when you were standing on stage and you were doing your routines, what did you talk about? Was it kind of just observational about things that happened in your life, or what, were you a political comedian, or what did you talk about?
Some of it was, I mean, at that time I was single. I was a single woman. So I talked about the dating
Yeah.
stuff, a lot of observational things. But I did have some sort of absurd jokes as well that were, I mean, I don't really remember a lot of my material, but there were some that were just weird, weird. Uh, I don't know who to compare it to, but yeah, I mean, I tried everything. And I think it was, I mean, the worst thing for me as a viewer is you go to those, beginner open mic nights and you can tell when the person is scared. And it sort of like ripples across the room
Yeah.
and everyone gets kind of nervous for them. And, oh, and knowing that I was scared, it was just like, oh, trying, yeah, I was just so paranoid that that would happen to me, although apparently I have a very good ability to mask mask that. I never got that feedback from people that watched me, but yeah, there's something about facing your fears. And I tell my son this, like, people that are brave are not, it's not that they don't feel fear, it's that they are scared and they do it anyway. Like, there's something compelling them to still do the thing, and I think for me that's what it was. There was something, I don't know if I can name what that thing is. There was something that compelled me to keep going, and I knew there was a skill I was developing there. And I had these dreams of, yeah, I'm going to stand on a big stage one day, and people are going to be listening to what I have to say. I don't know what I'm going to be talking about, but I wanted that on some level. And so, yeah, this was a natural way to do it, even though I was very scared the whole time. But
I love that you say to your son, when people are scared, they face their fears. I mean, it's that book, isn't it? Face your fears and do it anyway.
yeah,
And it's so true. And when we do face our fears, that is when we learn. We're doing full circle here, back to the beginning. That is when you learn, when you face your fears, because when you face your fears and you do something, yes, it may go absolutely horribly wrong, but you'll learn from it anyway. And when you face
hmm,
your fear and it goes right, the exhilaration. It always makes me laugh when there's this thing that I see pop up occasionally. I don't know if you've ever seen it on Instagram, and it must have its own account, and I've never followed it, but it pops up. So these guys are base jumpers, and they have the person strapped to the front of them. Now, for me, I mean, we have seen base jumping go tragically wrong,
yes,
but this somehow is a tourist attraction. I think it's like in some canyon in America.
ooh,
I don't think it's a Grand Canyon, but it's a big canyon. And they give the person a camera and they hold it, in their hands like this, and it's like one of those invisible cameras. I don't know how they work, but so you see the person standing there. And this guy is going, okay, so why are we here, Mandy? And Mandy's going, oh, because I just retired and I want to scare myself. And he's going, all right, then. So we're going to take some steps to the edge. And she's going, oh, I don't know. I don't know. He's going one step. She's going, okay, one step. Okay, okay. And then he goes two steps. Okay, okay. We're on the edge. And he's going, are you ready to base jump? She's going, I don't know. I don't know. And he goes, we're going to count to three and we're going to go, Mandy. That's so funny. And you see this person almost like, evaporating in front of your eyes. And then they literally get to the edge and he goes, are you ready? And he goes, one, two, three, base jump. And off they go. And then when the thing opens and they're flying, of course, the first thing that happens is the expletives come out from the
yeah,
person. And then they realize that they're now gliding down to earth. They're not dropping. And then you see this absolute elation in what they've achieved. They have faced their biggest fear. They've jumped into certain death, except they got a parachute. But they have overcome that fear, and it is the most magnificent elation. And these guys
yeah,
love it because they go, how do you feel? Oh, I feel amazing. And then,
Yeah.
and it's so funny because quite often the person will go, I love you, like this person behind them.
Yeah.
But it's that big emotion. And we need those emotions in our life.
Yeah.
We need that fear. We need to jump off the edge. I'm not saying go and do base jumping,
Yeah.
but we need to jump off the edge. And if that's standing up and doing some stand-up comedy when you're terrified of public speaking, and if it goes horribly wrong, so what? 25 people in the room are not going to
Exactly.
laugh at you, and you're going to walk out and they're never going to see you again. And you tried it. You have to try these things. Like when I
Yes.
launched this podcast, I just Googled, how do you do a podcast? I had no clue. I mean, I'd interviewed people for years because I did it as a kind of, TV presenter. I knew how to interview, but I didn't know how to create a podcast. I didn't know about the technicalities. I didn't know if anybody was going to listen. Breaking the blocks. Are people interested in human stories where we just talk about breaking the blocks? Do people care? Turns out that they do. Turns out
Yeah.
people are interested. So you just have to try these things. So I encourage you, whoever's
Absolutely.
listening right now, what is your fear? What is it? And whatever that fear is, jump off that cliff with your
Yeah.
parachute, but just do it.
Just do it. Absolutely. Yeah, just do it. I mean, it's never a bad thing to put yourself out there. I mean, you're gonna learn something. And it's just like going through improv classes and stand up is, yeah, I felt scared every week, but bit by bit, the level of fear went down. Like my fear threshold was raised so that, yeah, I could do it on my own or I could, do other things. And it's the same. It's the same with everybody.
And it's like what you were saying, Sarah, when you said about, I wanted to have my voice heard. I wanted to get, the voice out there, the words out there. I wanted to be seen in that way and speak my truth. And there are so many people who say all these things in their living rooms to their walls or to
Yeah.
themselves, and they don't say it to other people. They don't speak their truth because they're terrified. And
Yeah.
while ever you stay in that room and keep talking to the wall, that fear is not going to go away. It's just going to get bigger. You have to face your
Absolutely.
fears. Otherwise, they will completely overwhelm you and you will lose.
Yeah. And I will say, just tiny piece of advice for anyone. And this is something that I used to do when I would go in for a job interview or even sometimes doing comedy. You acknowledge that fear first. I remember going into job interviews and I would say, they would say, "Oh, how are you doing?" And I would say, "Oh, I'm a little bit nervous today, but happy to be here." And same thing, like, okay, like standing up at a microphone, like, "Hey guys, oh man, I'm feeling the nerves with all your eyes on me right now." Like, people love
They
that.
do.
It's like all of a sudden those folks are on your side because you're acknowledging that humanity. I think there's a part of that. There's a part of that, those feelings or fear of being seen in an authentic way that has to do with judgment. And so much of it, like fearing judgment of other people, and often it's like your own judgment of yourself. But what I've come to realize is, especially as somebody who puts my art out in the world, and you as well, like putting your podcasts out in the world, you may get those nasty comments. I mean, who knows what's going to prompt them? It could be anything. But what I've come to realize is those commenters, it says everything about the commenter, but nothing about you. So those, like the hate, whatever vitriol that might get directed, it's a reflection of the person expressing it. Yeah, it's a reflection of them and not the subject of the comments.
Something I saw on Instagram again the other day, that was someone had taken a picture of a celebrity, and it was actually probably a 20-year-old girl, and they had screenshot the picture, and then they screenshot the comments, and then a picture of the person who'd left the comment.
Ah,
And it was very interesting because this was a 20-year-old girl. And I think she was a little bit, I can't remember who it was, but it was a celebrity who I think she was wearing makeup that was a bit kind of gothic and this kind of long black thing and whatever. And the comments underneath, they were mostly from middle-aged men who were commenting on this girl. And they were writing things like, well, I wouldn't now, or she needs to put some weight on, or she needs to lose some weight.
Right.
And I was like, who are you to comment on this young 20? You wouldn't now.
Right.
I'm sorry, did she give you a choice?
Yeah,
Do you think
exactly.
that you would have before and she would have allowed it? But I found it quite, when you look at the comments and you go, oh, wow. And these guys as well, by the way, were also that some of the pictures on their profiles, this person dotted out the people in the profile picture. But some of these men were pictured with their wife and their
Yeah.
daughter.
You're right. Yes. Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, it's a very, we could talk for another 3 hours on that on a podcast.
Right. My rule is never read the comments.
Yeah, you can't win. This is the thing, you can't win. You
Yes.
can win yourself by learning lessons from it, but you can't win because you are never going to please everybody. Absolutely, never going to please
Absolutely.
everybody.
Nor should you please
No.
everyone.
So Sarah, in sort of coming to the conclusion then,
Yeah.
what do you still have to overcome in terms of fears then? So we've conquered the public speaking, we're conquering the privilege and the guilt because we're doing things about that, conquering the anxiety because we're journaling and doing things about that. So what is there left for you to get over in terms of a fear, or what do you still want to learn in your life?
Oh man. I mean, I'm still working on so many of those things that you just mentioned. But it's almost like some of these life lessons, they just sort of come back. It's like the spiral. So you work on it in another iteration. But the anxiety is still there. Still, despite the work that I've done, still that a fear of being seen in some ways. Um, yeah, and sort of the ability to accept accolades. I'm one of those. Oh no, no, like stop. I'm one of those. And so being able to accept good is something that I'm still working on. I feel like there's so much left to learn. There's so much. As I mentioned earlier, I want to live until I'm, a good old age. Knock on wood. Um, I'm so I love art so much. I want to keep expanding the work that I do, whether it's through fiber and other media as well. And my dreams. Like, I would love to have my quilt hanging up next to Andy Warhol in a
I can
museum.
see it. I can see it.
I would love that. And I know I can get better. I so it's sort of still taking the risk, still pushing myself, still sharing my authentic voice, and sort of speaking truth to power. I still have some fears there, especially in a coming into an authoritarian system now where there might be real consequences. Um, but it's so important to do. So I think for me, it all relates to that being seen, but being seen in my real authentic self, and being as brave as some of the rebellious people that I admire so much. There's work to do for me there yet, and so I hope this podcast gets out there, and then someday, years down the road, somebody can come back and say, "Oh, look, she's a lot more now."
Are you talking
And
about
so
me or
it's
you?
both of
Let's
us.
hope it were both of
I want,
us.
yeah, I want both of us just to be more. I want to be bigger and more Sarah. Make sure this. I think about sometimes. I'm a spirit having a Sarah
We
experience.
all are. We're all spirits having a Rachel, Sarah, Michael, whatever experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's make this. Let's get on with it and have it be big and meaningful.
Yeah.
And so that's what I need to work on.
I was going to ask you if you had a motto because I always ask that, but I have to say I love that motto. I'm a spirit having a Sarah experience. I think that's you just put
Yeah,
your name in that, whatever that is. That should be a motto for people. So if you're a listener right now, I want you to say that out loud. I am a spirit having a experience, whatever your
exactly.
name is. That's so good.
Exactly. Yes.
Well, one final thing to say before we go, because I'm going to say, make sure I want people to go and look at your art.
Mm,
First of all, Sarah is going to be working with me on the Picture This VIP club, which starts in
yes.
June over on the Crafty Monkeys website. Very excited to see what you, because I gave
Oh
Sarah
my gosh.
and Nicole Leff a picture
Hmm.
to create in quilt form or any kind of art form. And I gave the challenge was to give the artists a challenge as well as our students who are going to be following along and learning techniques. So I gave you something which is completely outside of your comfort zone, which is a building
Yes.
or buildings in New York. So
Yes.
because that's so harsh and rigid and structural for you, when all I've seen from you are these wonderful emotive portraits, so that's what I've mainly seen from you. So I wanted to give you something completely different. So I'm super
Yes.
excited to see how you are going to represent that picture. So that's starting in June, but you're at the
Yes.
end of the year next year. But yeah, people should go and have a look at that. But I owe the alien. Tell me just very briefly, where is that from? That's your Instagram handle.
Okay. So, and I will say I signed my art as Io the alien.
Okay.
There's a few. There's a. They're multi. It's a multifaceted story. The whole the alien um, part of it was originally started as a tongue-in-cheek nod to my immigration status when I moved to the US, because in all the documents coming into the United States they refer to immigrants as the alien. So I was like, fine, I'll be the alien. And then Io is actually a moon of Jupiter, but that's not the reason why I chose it. And now this is a bit of an unusual story, but years ago, I was part of it was like a women's spiritual group called the Red Moon Mystery School, and has since been renamed, so you can't find it under that name anymore. But part of that practice was to do sort of a meditation on on a power symbol for you. And the one thing that kept coming up for me was this circle with a line through it. And it was like, for me, that's sort of like a power symbol. But I also like how the circle with a line through it, when you take it away, it's just I and O, which for me has a lot of different meaning too, off and on, and all these things. So I just liked the combination Io the alien, and because the name Sarah Spencer is very common, and there's another artist named Sarah Spencer, as well as of course the member of the royal family, or Lady Di's sister. I was like, okay, I think it makes sense for me to adopt a pseudonym for my work, and so that's where Io the alien came from.
Perfect. I love it. And of course, it had to have a spiritual meaning. It had to
Of
have a spiritual
course.
meaning. But I love that. It reminds me of Sting's song, I'm a legal alien. I'm a legal
Yes.
alien. I'm an Englishman in New York.
In New York,
Very
yes.
clever. Very clever little catchy tune, that one. Yeah. I'm a legal alien. Yeah, I was going to say you are a bit alien-like, really, in terms of coming down to this planet and learning lessons. But
Yeah.
you really are. There is just something about you. I really do believe as well. all that we've been saying in this interview is about being authentic, but
Mm.
and things come back to you when you're authentic. But I also think that you find your people. I think people somehow come into your circle. And it's interesting because I've been thinking I really need to find some new artists, but I like it to be organic. I do search through Instagram, but I like it to somehow happen. And I trust in the universe that it will. And that day I just happened to be talking to Carl, and he had just happened to see your work at a show, I think, or something. And he said,
Yes.
you have to look at this girl, Sarah. And as soon as I
Yes,
opened up your Instagram, I didn't even look past the first post. I looked, which I believe is your husband in pants and cowboy boots.
Yes,
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
my husband.
Oh, we should say underpants, because in America,
Yeah.
it's pants, which are trousers. No, he hasn't got any trousers on, ladies and gents.
No, he
No, he
doesn't.
hasn't. He's got his little Y fronts on. And might be people are going to think it's a photograph. No, it's a piece representing
Yes.
him. But yeah, that was the first person I saw. And I was just like, wow, I love this. I don't even know to go further. So I contacted you. And I'm so pleased that we are working together. I'm determined to get you on one of my retreats. I'd love you to
Oh,
teach in
yeah,
person.
that'd be great.
So yeah, I think you're amazing. I really do, and I think you do have great things ahead of you. And I think partly because you are a fantastic artist, and as we say, go on and look at Sarah's work, but also because you've got that wonderful attitude. You're giving back. You're learning. You're willing to fail. You have that lovely humility about you, which is that guilt, that privilege, but it's humility. And you're just willing to face your fears. And I absolutely know that big things are coming for you. So, yeah.
Thank you, Rachel. You're so kind. I appreciate you.
And look at what you just did. You didn't bat it away. You didn't go, oh
Ah,
no.
I'm learning my
We
lesson.
learned another lesson in this podcast.
Yes.
You're
You're seeing me unfolding in real time.
Yes, I have the power. Oh, yeah. It's been a joy. So, maybe come back and we'll discuss, we'll go into the representation of women a bit more. Oh, no, that really will put off some viewers. But never mind, there'll be a few will listen, so that'll be fine.
We can find our right audience. We'll find the good ones
We'll
that we
find the
want to
good
follow
ones.
us.
Yeah. Well, look, thank you so much. Have the rest of a glorious day. And I'm very excited to see where the journey takes you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Just before you go, lovely listener, can I ask you a favour? If you have a friend who you think would enjoy listening to this podcast, would you mind please telling them about it? It helps me to spread the word, and you never know, they might get a life lesson out of it, or at the very least, just have a lovely 40 minutes of relaxing time for themselves. The second thing to say is that if you have enjoyed this, it would really help me if you would give me a little quick like or a comment, especially if you're listening on one of the podcast platforms. It just means that when anybody lands on the page, they can see that people have reviewed it, they've liked it, enjoyed it, and got something out of it. So if you wouldn't mind leaving me a review, that would be amazing. And the final thing to say is that if you are a business and you're thinking, how do I get my message out there? Well, you could do it on this podcast. All you have to do is reach out to me, rachel@breakingtheblocks.com. The details are below in the box. Thank you so much to everybody for listening and enjoying and saying the lovely things that you're saying.